Hey everybody, I'm Hal Hughes. I'm an alcoholic. Yeah. Thank you, Steve, for asking me to come down here. I appreciate it. My story is a rather typical story of Alcoholics Anonymous. I drank a lot. It caused me a lot of trouble. I tried to stop. I found that I couldn't. I found AA and asked for some help, and some men introduced me to the steps. I found a power, and that power, relieved me of my alcoholism. And that's the miracle of what happened in my life. But as I've been around, I've found that that's pretty typical of those who reach out for help and work the steps. Which is pretty unique for me and my family, that I don't drink anymore. I couldn't put more than 9 days together, on my best effort. And I've got over 9 years. So my sobriety date is June 20th, 2009. I'm from Holly Springs. My home group is There's a Solution group. We meet on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7. We have a closed discussion on Thursdays and a beginner's meeting on Tuesdays, and we'd love to have you if you want to come out. So I'll just tell you the details of the story. I guess I got an hour to fill here. So I was born in Charlotte. Typical, had a mother, had a father. Now my dad was a big drinker, and he was a violent drinker. And that's probably where I got my alcoholism. I've heard that it's hereditary, it can be passed on in the genes, and he was quite a drinker. And they didn't stay together too long. He roughed her up one too many times, and she left. And we moved around a lot. And I had an older brother. And so we didn't have a whole lot of stuff, but I had a normal childhood, as I thought. I played some sports, and I goofed off, and I went to school, and I got in a little bit of trouble. And, I kind of learned early that a good lie can get you places. I was down the railroad tracks, and I was smoking some cigarettes, and the brush caught on fire, and I started to put it out, and a fire truck drove by and jumped out and helped me, and for some reason they made me junior fireman. They thought I was trying to put out this fire, and I agreed with them, and and I realized that if you told a lie, maybe you get out of trouble, and that carried on, and I learned to be kind of dishonest from an early age to get out of trouble. That's really what it was, to avoid some consequences and responsibility. And that went on for many, many years. But, we moved around, from place to place, stayed in the same town, so it was kind of weird. We were always, every 6 months or so, moving across town to some other trailer park or something else. But I went to school, and everything was somewhat normal, and I guess it was around 13 or 14 that I had my first beer. And I liked it. Nothing spectacular happened, with it. It was like 3 of us who shared a 6-pack. And, we stole it from one of the guys' dads and stole some cigarettes. And we just walked around the neighborhood at like 1 o'clock in the morning. Just goofing off, having fun. Something happened, though. Because the next day when I woke up, I immediately remembered that there was a bottle of scotch in the kitchen that had been there had been moved around with us for at least 5 years. I think it was a present to my mother. But I just remembered that we had some alcohol in the house. And so the next day was the first time that I really got drunk. I poured me a big glass of scotch, and I filled the rest of it with sweet tea. So no one could tell I drank any. And I drank that whole cup. And I got dizzy, and I threw up, and the room was spinning. And I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. And I drank that whole bottle, and every time I'd pour a cup, I'd pour some sweet tea back in it. And so eventually I was just drinking sweet tea. And that wasn't going to cut it. And so at that time, you could pick up bottles and exchange them for 10 cents. You could take them right to the gas station. They give you 10 cents a piece. And I would bring in bags of them. And I'd find somebody to give me some wine, and I would try to hold down that Mad Dog 2020, anything I could to get drunk. And at that point, it wasn't that big of a deal. It was a big fascination for me. And my brother, he died in a car crash. And it was just devastating. He was 21 and I was 14, and I just looked up to him. He was the only man in my life. He was the guy who would, on Saturday mornings, put me in figure fours, watching wrestling, and wouldn't let me up. And he would buy me a shotgun for Christmas when I'm like 9 and teach me how to shoot it and things like that. He was everything to me. And he was gone. And no one really explained anything to me except for, your brother died in a car wreck and the funeral was on Tuesday. And that was about it. And I just did not know how to cope with that. But I had this new fascination with this alcohol. And I was going to use it. I figured it would be helpful to me. And from that moment on, I had a love affair with the drink. And I would like to say that it worked. But really from an early age, it wasn't working for me. It was one consequence after another. It was very shortly thereafter, I was in scrapes with the law. I was hanging around a whole new set of friends. I went to reform school. By the end of the year, I had stole my mom's car, had a guy in the car with me. We were all drunk. There was this drive-in movie down in Charleston that we were going to go see. And when we got there, it was closed, and we drove through, and the guy jumped out and went into the concession stand and took everything out of it, and the cops came. And I tried to run the cop over and busted through a barricade and ended up on Rivers Avenue, and they were chasing us. And long story short, I spent the holidays in Columbia, South Carolina in youth detention. I got my first DUI at 15, second one at 16. By the time before I was 17, I ended up going back to that reform school. And I got kicked out of both high schools in our town. Neither one of them wanted anything to do with me. They were permanently expelled me. And my poor mother had lost one of her sons, and I was just about as crazy and off the chain as I could be. And I didn't see that at the time. But the craziness kept on. I kept driving a car, whatever car I could get without a license. So at 17, they sent me to prison. And I was just baffled. How could someone get sent to prison for not having a driver's license? But apparently you can, because that's what they did to me. They sent me straight to adult prison. I went to Columbia, South Carolina, and I'm a little guy, and I'm scared to death, and I think I'm a victim, and it's all because of my drinking. And they put me out on this big old prison yard. And I'm just scared to death. And I'm carrying this mat and pillow. And, thankfully I saw somebody that I knew from town. And I went straight towards them. And it was good to see a familiar face. And I looked across that prison yard. And way on the other side of that prison yard, I seen this group of girls. And I was a little confused. And I asked my friend, what in the world is the group of girls doing over here? He goes, oh yeah, there's a lot of girls over here on this yard. I'll show you. I'll introduce you to them. So we start walking across the yard, and the closer I get, something ain't right. There's fishnet stockings, there's mini skirts, there's these long, what I can see now are wigs. And these guys are dudes. And I'm like, what in the world have I got myself into? And this little prison camp was really crazy, and I'm just playing this victim, like I don't belong to be here, and all of that. I learned much later on, when you break the law and you're a menace to society, there's a place for you. And so I did my time there, and I got out, and I continued to drink, and continued to drink too much, continued to get more DUIs. Had a brief stay at a treatment facility to try to sober up at the authority of other people. I don't remember a whole lot about that. I remember I went out of my room late at night and jumped in the security guard's golf cart and ran it around the grounds and had a little fun with it and didn't get caught. That's about all I remember. I came back home, and the very next day I was drinking again. But by the time I was 21, I had 5 DUIs. I had a slew of not driving or driving without a license, and I was in a world of trouble. And I just couldn't understand what was wrong with me. Why was I in all this trouble? Why are not my friends in all this trouble? I drink with them. Why are they not, getting all these DUIs? I couldn't quite see it. So I had all this legal trouble, but there was something in my mind that said that treatment center had something to do with not living this way. I wasn't really sure what it was, but there was some kind of connection there. And I didn't know what was wrong with me, so this was the first time that I really asked for some help. Maybe I shouldn't be drinking. Because I would wake up in the morning and I would look for change, and I would go to the store and start drinking beer at 8 or 9 in the morning. I'm 21 years old. I don't have a job. I don't have an education. I've got a bunch of legal trouble. And, I'm just a burden to my family and to my friends. And I just didn't know what was wrong with me. So they got me into this treatment center, the same one again. And I still don't remember a whole lot about what they were telling me. But when I got out, I had a big book. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I was scared from all these charges that I had against me. But I was sober. I had been sober for about 28 days when I got released and went back to my mom's apartment. I remember one day I opened that big book and started reading it, and I read the doctor's opinion. And as soon as I read the doctor's opinion, it was like the clouds parted and the sun came through. I knew what was wrong with me. I was an alcoholic. I had this allergy that when I put alcohol in my body, it kicked in and it caused a craving, and I drank too much. And I couldn't control it. And that made so much sense. I mean, it was like all my problems were over. And that's as far as I read. But I had this new breath of life that I was an alcoholic, and I have this allergy. And things are going to be different now. It was so refreshing to know what was wrong with me. I was so confused up until that point. So I ended up going to court for all that stuff. And I made a deal to serve a year, which was pretty lenient. And I get up in front of the judge, and the judge sentenced me to 12 years. And I have a little bit of a fit. I signed some papers for a year, and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I had a deal with this guy over here, and you're giving me 12 years. I'm only supposed to get a year. And that judge looked right at me, and he said, son, he goes, I think you should rot in prison. I'm not going to be the one to give you a year. So if you're going to get a year, it's going to be from a different judge. So you're going to have to go back and sit in county jail till the next one comes to town. And that's exactly what I did. They sent me back to the county jail, and I sat there for 6 weeks waiting for the next judge. Scared, sober, just found out that I'm an alcoholic and what's wrong with me. So, I was scared that I wasn't going to get that year from that new judge. It made completely sense to throw the book at me. So I wrote this new judge a letter. And I had a lot of time. So I wrote almost 20 pages down. And I talked to this public defender when I went to court, and I had this stack of ripped up notebook paper. And I said, I wrote a letter to the judge. He said, son, just take your year and get out of here. And I was like, but I've got this letter from the judge. He said, if you're going to give that letter to the judge, you're going to walk up there and give it to him yourself. And so court went in session, and sentencing was about to start, and he said, do you have anything to say before I sentence you? I said, well, I knew I was going to be nervous and scared, so I wrote down a letter for you. And I walked up there and handed it to him way up there. You know, he was quiet for a minute. He was browsing that first page, and he called everybody that was out there into his chambers. The district attorney, the court reporter, everybody. He called them right back there. And they sat back there for about an hour and a half. Well, I'm sitting there sweating bullets, not knowing if I'm getting a year, if I'm going to get 12 years, you know. They finally come back out, and, you know, my public defender, he's just shaking his head. You know, he goes, you ain't never going to be able to do this. Never. I'm like, what? He's like, you're going home. They're not going to put you in jail. You know, what I wrote in that letter was my story. I wrote that, you know, my dad was an alcoholic, how I started drinking, how I didn't know what was wrong with me, how I just found out that I was an alcoholic, and that, you know, that I wanted to do something with myself. And that judge said he was going to give me a chance to do that. And it was pretty strict. You know, it started with intensive, full supervision, house arrest. You know, the probation officer would come with his gun to make sure I was locked up in the house. But there was a whole list of things. And one of the things that he did was he said that I had to remain in school for the entirety of the 5-year probation. And we lived right across from a community college. And so I started going to this community college. I had permission to leave the house to go to the community college and to go down the other street to the AA meeting. And so I signed up for some classes, and I started going to AA meetings. And that's the only places I could go. The rest of the time I was stuck in the apartment, which was good for me, because you know, under those conditions I could stay sober. I got a little girlfriend from the AA meeting. She would come over to the apartment, go to class. Everything was fine for about 2 years. All was well. Now, I didn't get a sponsor. I didn't work the steps. I was an alcoholic, and I knew what my problem was, and I'm going to these meetings, and I'm going to be good. In about 2 years, it dawned on me, I'm about done with this community college. And my probation officer's wanting to know what I'm going to do about school, since it's a requirement. And I'm down in Charleston, South Carolina. And I had gotten my GED. And so I didn't exactly know what I was going to do. So I applied to a college. I had thought my dad went, and he did for some time, go to NC State. And so I sent them an application. And they sent me an acceptance letter to start in the fall. And I was scared to death. And I didn't know how to cope with that. Within a week, I was drinking again. After 2 years of that probation, I had a little bit of freedom to come and go a little bit. And I started drinking again. And I had about 4 weeks to find a place to live and get to Raleigh and start the School of Engineering. And I started drinking. And I ended up on Hillsborough Street, drunk, going to satellites, drinking with the homeless, getting late to class. I never took an 8 o'clock class after that. But it wasn't pretty. I had a bicycle, though, and that's what saved me. I didn't have a car. Because when I drank, I like to jump in the car and drive around and have fun and see people and stuff like that. But my drinking picked up the same as it always was. You know, I would buy a 6-pack, and I would drink it thinking that would be plenty, and it was never enough. And then I would go buy a 12-pack, and I might finish that. I might pass out. I might do something in a blackout. But I went to state. And for some reason I did well. I made good grades. I went to class in the afternoons. I moved closer to campus. I went right there, down there by Glenwood and Hillsborough Street, if you know the area. But I was still drinking, knowing that I was an alcoholic, not sure what the solution was going to be. And I would ride my bike. There was an AA meeting called Big Book, Raleigh Big Book, across the street from campus. And I'd ride my bike over there, and I would see the people standing out in front of the doors, smoking, getting ready for the meeting. And most of the time, I just didn't have the courage to go in. And I would go over to the bar or to the convenience store and keep drinking. Every once in a while, I would go into that meeting, and by the time they finished with how it works, it was just too much. I just couldn't take it, and I would just leave. So by the time that I was almost about to graduate, I had gotten to another AA meeting and met a couple of guys. And I still wasn't asking about the solution. But I knew AA had something to do with not drinking. And so I met some guys. They were nice guys, and I put together maybe 60 days sobriety, and then graduation was coming up, and I was going to have to move. I was going to have to find a job. My probation was just ending, and I couldn't cope with all that change, and I started drinking again. I got a job. I bought a car, even still without a driver's license. I started driving again, and I'm drinking. Things are going okay, I guess. You know, I'm staying at home. I'm drinking till I pass out. I'm getting to work, and I switched jobs a couple of times. My drinking is really starting to get out of control again. I meet this young lady. We get pregnant. I lose my job. She's got some similar issues that I do. We're like toxic, and we're fighting, and we split. And she's pregnant, and she moves to Florida, and I chase her, and I'm going to try to be a dad, and I'm still a drunk, and I can't stop drinking, and that ends up being just a disaster down there. We do nothing but fight and argue, and beat on each other, and I come back to live with my mom in South Carolina. I go to meet a friend at a bar at noon, and she's late. So by the time she gets there by 1 o'clock, I've had 7, 8 beers. We sit there till 2. I've had about 12. She said her kids are getting off the school bus. If you want to come over to the house, just follow me. I'm like, sure, Jump in the car, follow her. Next thing you know, there's an airbag in my face. Started pouring down rain. I crossed the yellow line. I ran head on into another car and just totaled both of them. Almost killed the driver of the other car. I was in a world of trouble. I'd really hurt somebody this time. So I go to jail, and I don't know what in the world I'm going to do. I'm just, this drinking thing it's just got to stop. But I have no clue how to get it to stop. I end up going to court. She has the baby. We're trying to make it work. I get sentenced to 4 years into prison again, and I get out in 2. She's gone. The baby's at her mom's house. I'm not going to drink anymore. I've had enough at this point. I'm not going to drink anymore. I get a job and I start visiting my child, and I meet this nice girl. She's a church girl. She's going to Duke Divinity School. I didn't quite understand that at the moment, what that meant. I was to learn real quick what that meant. We got engaged. Then I learned that she was going to be a preacher. I wasn't quite so sure what a preacher's husband did. But it was fine. I got custody of this little boy. I'm not drinking. I didn't have any solution. I really didn't. Things were going good for a while. I'd been locked away from alcohol for such a long time. That habit carried with me for a little while, but the day came. And right before that wedding, when I realized that I was getting ready to be a preacher's husband, and I didn't know what life was going to be in store for me, I had tried to get sober several ways, and the church was one of them, and it wasn't successful, and I didn't find that the people in the church were genuine, even though that was just my perception. So I did what I do. I started drinking again. And I ruined that honeymoon. Stayed drunk in Italy. Argued. Broke that little girl's heart. Came back to start our life, and tried to get sober. Went to some detoxes. Tried to take some medication from some psychiatrist, and nothing seemed to be working. There's a medication called Antabuse. My wife insisted that I take it, so I would put it in my mouth in the morning, and when I walk out the door, I'd spit it in the bushes, and I'd go start drinking. Then she wanted to see me swallow it, and so I'd swallow it. And this is how bad I wanted to drink. This is how bad I thought I couldn't go through life without drinking. I said I would swallow that pill, and I would drive to that gas station, and I would shake up a beer. I'd open it out behind the gas station, and I would chug every bit of it, and then I would sit there and put my finger down my throat, and I'd puke it all back up, and hopefully that pill came back up with it. And I would get on my day of drinking. And it wasn't until recently that I realized that some of those days I got really sick. And I think maybe she was giving me another pill in my coffee or something. Because I got some bad headaches on some of those days, really bad. But that's how sick I was. And and I really didn't know a way out. She left. She left and went back home to Kansas. She wanted me to move out there, thinking it was going to be good for us, that we could start over. She would get a church in Kansas to preach at, and it was going to work. And I didn't want to have anything to do with Kansas. And so that woman, the mother of my child, came back into the picture, and moved in while my wife was gone. And when she found out about that, got a FedEx package with divorce papers, which I signed and sent back. And me and this woman who had that toxic relationship was going to try to make it work. And it was just as toxic as it always had been. She got pregnant again. And, I was trying. I was going to some AA meetings, here and there, and, really looking for a solution. I was reading books. I'd gone to some outpatient programs, and, I was trying everything, I really didn't want to live with all these consequences and this inner torture of having to drink all the time. We had a little girl who's handicapped. She had spina bifida and hydrocephalus, and it was a pretty big deal. Didn't really know how big of a deal it was until we had to live it. Lots of surgeries, lots of going to the hospital. The way we were living, we were under the microscope from family and from anybody who were partners with the hospitals and things like that. And it wasn't too long before Child Protective Services came in and took our children. Fortunately, they placed these children in the grandparents' home. It wasn't strangers, so I'm very happy for that, and put us on all kinds of restrictions to straighten up or lose your kids forever. And we drug that process out, from what they tell us, longer than any couple has ever done. I mean, we drug it out for 2 years. Before we got straightened out, they were doing regular drug tests, and, somehow or another they didn't believe that we were sober and clean, and so they ordered a hair test for me. And so the Weisenheimer that I am, I show up to this hair test, looking like Mr. Clean, shaved my head bald as can be. And they were so mad at me. They took me straight into court to see the judge, and they said, "Look at this guy. He shaved his hair off for you." And the judge was, probably not appropriate, but he was doing everything he could not to laugh. He's like, "Well, it's not against the law to shake your head." I don't know, but that's how I was living, I just couldn't see it. Finally, this woman that's been like Bonnie and Clyde to me, we were going through so much together. She had enough. I had woke up one morning. We finally got this little rundown apartment on Wade Avenue in Raleigh, and my kids were still not with us. And I woke up one morning, and I didn't remember the night before, but the living room was tore up, and there was food thrown everywhere, and she was just sitting on the couch, just staring at me like a look that I've never seen before. Apparently, I had, gotten a big argument. Took all the food out of the refrigerator, threw it everywhere, and I don't remember any of it. But she left, and I went on my last bender. I went to the liquor store and had like $5 and bought a pint. I drank that down, went and borrowed some more money, and by the end of the night, I woke up again with an airbag in front of my face. This time I didn't hurt anybody. It wasn't that serious of a deal, but that's what happened. I ended up going to the hospital and ended up getting a DUI ticket under my butt on the gurney. Ended up getting all my clothes cut off of me and getting kicked out of the hospital at 4 o'clock in the morning in this paper suit. And the next day I woke up in this tore up apartment with food rotting all over it. And I looked in the mirror, and that guy that was looking back, I only knew one thing. He had absolutely no clue on how to get sober. I had absolutely no power against this at all. I was powerless. I didn't know it at the time, but I had taken step one right there in that mirror. I knew that there was a meeting around the corner the next night. So I stayed in bed all day and all night and waited till the next night, and I went to that meeting. And I was scared, and I didn't know what to expect. I'd been to a lot of AA meetings before, but never like this. Never broken. Surrendered. And I got there, and I asked a guy for some help. And I got some help. They directed me to a book. They had a book of a bunch of members in it, and said you could get a sponsor in there. I took a name out of the book and called the guy the next day, and his wife answered. And I just asked for him. She said he wasn't there. And I went to hang up, and she goes, wait, don't hang up. She goes, what's your name? And I gave her my name, and she said, I'll make sure he calls you back soon. Within about 10 minutes, the guy called me back. He wanted to meet, wanted to talk to me. We met at a coffee shop. He told me a little bit about himself, asked me a few questions about myself. He said he thought that I had just as good a chance as anybody to get sober, as long as I did a few things. You know? One of the things he said was washing coffee pots will get you sober. So after every meeting, it was a big meeting, had these big urns. I was in there washing coffee pots after each meeting. What I didn't know at the time was people would come in and out of that kitchen. And they'd introduce themselves to me. And after a month or two, I knew those people. You know, the people, I knew the ones that were hanging out after the meeting, doing the work, cleaning up, talking. Those were the people that I was meeting in AA. Started working the steps. I was a little leery, you know, of some religious stuff. I was ignorant, really, is what it was. And I read the book, you know, sat down and read the book. I knew that there was a power greater than myself. I believed in God. I just really didn't think God had anything to do with me. That His power was unreachable for me. I believed that He created the heavens and the earth and everything that we see. I believed in that power. I just didn't believe that I could tap into a power that could help me personally. And I was told to look around the room, look at all these sober people, because they were all just like you. We all had to start right here. And that guy helped me fit in, helped me realize that I wasn't so unique, that my problems weren't unique, and the solution isn't unique. So I continued to work the steps, and wrote down all my stuff. Didn't want to look at it, but I shared it. Found out some things about myself. It was about 4 or 5 months sober that I realized that I wasn't thinking about taking a drink. You know, I had had some obsession up until that point, but right around the fifth step, you know, I realized that I just wasn't thinking about drinking anymore. And it was pretty cool. You know, it was the first time in my life I had gone through a day without just torturing myself over when I was going to drink next or how I was going to live without drinking. And it was all right. I was starting to sleep better, eat better, started to work, you know, had to rake some yards, get some money. And things just continued to grow, you know. My sponsor told me about asking, you know, to have my defects removed, and he said, you know, don't think they're just all going to pop away. I mean, you've got to do something. Treat it like a farmer. I mean, in a big field, your job is to get out there and pull all them weeds. When a defect pops up, you got to pull it. You got to practice acting different. And so if you want to steal something, you got to practice charity. You got to practice giving something away, you know. And so slowly I started practicing these principles these guys in AA were teaching me. And I had a lot of doubt, but things were working. before you knew it, I had a list of all these people that I had harmed. I started calling them up, meeting with them. And that was really such a freeing, powerful step. It was scary to sit down in front of someone, for me, and to tell them how wrong I was and how can I straighten this out. That I wanted a better relationship between us, and I owed you. My sponsor taught me not to make an amends unless I was fully prepared not to live that way anymore. So some things took some time. So this woman who left, we had gotten, I guess I skipped this, we had gotten married right before our little girl was born. Through the course of getting sober, she came back. But the courts got off our case. We got our kids back. And it came time that I needed to make amends to her, how much I had hurt her. And I took her out to dinner. And in general, I acknowledged the things. I didn't rehash everything, but I acknowledged all the stuff that I did that was harmful. And I made a commitment to her, a promise of how I was going to behave. That she could expect, love and patience out of me. She could expect me to pay some bills. She could expect me not to try to control or bully her. That I would be a good husband and a good father. And Alcoholics Anonymous taught me how to fulfill those things. And she took that amends as seemingly very well at the time. What I didn't realize was that she didn't believe me at all. She had absolutely no faith that I was going to live up to any of that. Even though I was on a good run, she didn't have any faith it was going to stick. About 3 years later, I was in the kitchen, and out of the blue, she goes, "All right, I believe you." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "You remember what you told me at dinner about 3 years ago? All right, you got me. I believe you." And sometimes these amends take time. Sometimes cleaning up the wreckage takes time. But it's with, the practicing of these steps and guys holding me accountable, that I was able to be consistent. Keep coming to meetings, keep staying in the book, being sponsored, sponsoring other guys. My wife will tell you, she's a big believer of Alcoholics Anonymous. She certainly is. And so are my children. So is my mother. They are just amazed. I think the general public, probably also got it right. It's about time he quit drinking, paid his bills and stuff like that. And so that's what was happening with me, and a sponsor brought me into 10, 11, and 12. Told me I never have to go back as long as I stay current. He taught me how to pray. Now, I didn't know how to pray when I got here. I knew how to do these foxhole things in jail cells. Oh, God, please help me. Just get me out of here. And so every time I ask somebody in Alcoholics Anonymous for some help, it's right there and they give it to me. But I got to ask. So I asked how to pray. He said, well, just start with this, just admit you're an alcoholic. Say, God, I'm an alcoholic. I can't drink today. Would you please help me stay sober? I've kept that prayer, and I haven't had a drink. Alcoholics Anonymous has tapped me into that power that has just helped me, has removed this. And I would have never been a believer that I would be sober today and have absolutely no desire whatsoever to take a drink. Don't even think, the book says we'll take up a position of neutrality. It doesn't bother me a bit to go to a restaurant and people are cutting up, having drinks. I'm allergic to alcohol, and I can't drink, and I ask for help. And, I look at the world with a different set of eyes, The world has become such a great place to live, with such great people in it, and with such beautiful places to see and experience. I had no idea, I had no idea. How could I? But with the help of Alcoholics Anonymous, it just took all that away. I just had to ask for help. I had to break down. I had to surrender, work the steps. And for that, I am just so grateful and sober today. So thank you so much.